I stood behind the maintenance shed of the Veterans Affairs facility in Chicago, finishing a cigarette in the biting November wind. My name is Vince Moretti. I am 68 years old, a retired Marine, and most people assume I'm just an angry old veteran who never quite adjusted to civilian life. I prefer it that way. I like my quiet, isolated routine, but that routine shattered the moment a silver Bentley pulled up to the cracked pavement of the visitor lot. I recognized the car immediately. It belonged to my twin brother, Leo. We shared the exact same face, the same height, and the same receding hairline, but that was where the similarities ended. Leo was a billionaire real estate mogul, a soft, generous builder who believed the best in everyone. I was the hard one, the predator, the core, trained to do the dirty work. I crushed my cigarette as the driver's side door opened. My instincts instantly flared. The man stepping out of the luxury vehicle didn't look like a titan of industry. He looked like a broken ghost, walking with a heavy limp and hiding his face behind oversized sunglasses despite the overcast sky. "Leo?" I called out, marching over to him. I reached out for our usual bear hug, but the moment my hand brushed his shoulder, he violently flinched. It was the terrified recoil of a beaten dog. Trembling, Leo slowly removed his sunglasses, and the blood in my veins turned to ice. His left eye was completely swollen shut, painted in deep purple and sickly yellow. A fresh cut ran along his cheekbone. My hands curled into tight fists. "Who did this to you?" "Leo?" I demanded, my voice dropping into a low, menacing growl. It was nothing, Vince," he stammered, avoiding my eyes. "I just lost my footing and fell down the stairs." "Don't lie to me," I snapped, gripping him tighter. "Tell me the truth, or I swear to God, I am walking out of this facility and tearing your house apart myself." The facade cracked. Right there, in the parking lot, my billionaire brother broke down sobbing. "It's Braden," he choked out, "my son-in-law." The name hit me like a physical blow. Braden Cole, the slick, entitled finance director who had married Leo's only daughter, Mallory. "He wanted me to sign over the executive rights to the company," Leo continued, trembling. "When I refused, he pushed me down the stairs. Vince. He said if I tell anyone, he'll stop buying my heart medication. He said he'd let me die in that massive house, and no one would ever know." A blinding red haze settled over my vision. This parasitic gold digger was actively threatening my brother's life. I looked at Leo's reflection in the Bentley's window, then at my own. Aside from my thick, unkempt gray beard, we were identical. In that split second, a tactical plan formed. "Give me your suit," I ordered, leaving absolutely no room for argument. Leo blinked through his tears. "What?" I said, "Give me your suit, Leo. You are staying right here. The doctors think I'm just a grumpy old man. You can sleep in my room without fear. I am going to your house." Panic seized Leo's features. "Vince, no. Braden is dangerous. He's violent." I let out a dry, humorless bark of a laugh. "Braden is a finance director, Leo. He wears expensive cologne. I hunted armed men in jungles for a living. Let him try being violent with me." 10 minutes later, in the public restroom across the street, I shaved off the thick beard I had worn for 10 years. Staring back in the mirror was Leo Moretti, but with a lethal predator hiding just beneath the surface of the eyes. I slipped into his $5,000 Italian suit, took his leather wallet, and grabbed his silver-handled cane. "Rest, brother," I told Leo as I left him in my oversized clothes. "When I come back, your parasite problem will be permanently solved." Driving up to Leo's sprawling estate felt like penetrating an enemy compound. The massive wrought iron gates opened to reveal perfectly manicured lawns and a mansion big enough to house an infantry company. But the moment I stepped through the heavy oak doors, the air felt thick with hostility and a deep, unspoken fear. I had barely set my briefcase down when a voice boomed from the living room. "Look who finally decided to drag his useless carcass home." Braden Cole swaggered into the hallway. He was 35, tall, wearing a pristine white suit that probably cost more than my pension. He didn't offer a greeting or ask how his father-in-law was feeling. He marched right up and violently snatched the briefcase from my grip. "Did you sign the transfer papers, old man?" he barked. It took every ounce of military discipline to keep from driving his face through the nearest marble column. Instead, I slumped my shoulders, staring at the floor, and channeled Leo's paralyzing fear. "I need more time, Braden," I stammered, letting my voice waver. Braden sneered, stepping aggressively into my personal space. "You are useless, Leo. Totally and completely useless." Without warning, he pulled back his expensive dress shoe and kicked me brutally hard in the right shin. A sharp bolt of pain shot up my leg, and my combat instincts flared instantly. Every muscle screamed at me to strike back, to grab his throat and pin him to the floor. But I clamped down on the rage. Not yet. I let out a pathetic cry and intentionally crumpled to the marble floor, clutching my ankle like a frail victim. Braden stood over me and laughed a cold, cruel sound. "Look at you, pathetic. Get up, and don't think you're getting a gourmet dinner tonight. The kitchen is closed for parasites. You eat what is left." He stepped directly over my body and marched up the grand staircase. I stayed on the cold floor for a long moment, slowly rubbing my shin. The physical pain was grounding. I looked up at the glittering crystal chandelier and made a silent vow. By the time I was finished with Braden Cole, he would wish he had never learned how to walk. 2 hours later, the stark contrast in the dining room was enough to make me physically sick. We sat at a massive mahogany table. At the head sat Braden, arrogantly savoring a plate of buttered lobster tail and expensive truffle risotto. To his right sat my niece, Mallory. She looked exhausted, her eyes glued to her plate, deliberately refusing to make eye contact with me. Directly in front of me, the maid had silently placed a small, chipped bowl of lukewarm, watery oatmeal. It was a blatant power move. I picked up the silver spoon, making sure to let my hand tremble. Mallory finally spoke, her voice an urgent whisper. "Dad, please, just eat it quickly so you can go to bed." Hearing her voice break like that shattered a piece of my heart. She knew exactly what her husband was doing to her father, yet she said absolutely nothing. She was actively choosing to protect her luxurious lifestyle at the direct cost of her father's dignity and safety. In that chilling realization, Mallory ceased to be a victim in my eyes. She was a silent accomplice. Braden lazily swirled the expensive red wine in his crystal glass, fixing me with a predatory grin. "You know, Leo, I've been thinking. Maybe the master bedroom is just too big for you. Maybe the basement would be safer, less stairs for you to fall down." He heavily emphasized the word fall, mocking his own violence. "I cannot move to the basement, Braden," I replied softly, letting my voice crack. "It is far too damp down there, my chest." Braden violently slammed his hand down on the table, causing the expensive silverware to jump. "Stop whining. God, I am so utterly sick of your voice." He stood up abruptly, grabbing the heavy bottle of vintage red wine, and marched over to me. "Here, maybe a drink will finally shut you up." He tipped the bottle over my glass, but he didn't stop when it was full. He kept pouring. The dark, crimson liquid overflowed the rim, spilling heavily onto the pristine white tablecloth and dripping directly onto my trembling hand. It was hot, sticky, and completely intentional. "Oops," Braden mocked, his voice dripping with venomous sarcasm. My hand slipped. This was it, the perfect moment to test the waters of his arrogance. I jerked my hand backward, acting as if the wine had burned me. But instead of pulling my arm into my chest, I let my hand flail wildly outward. The back of my knuckles struck the overflowing wine glass perfectly. The crystal glass launched through the air and shattered violently against Braden's pristine, $5,000 white suit pants. The dark red wine bloomed instantly across his crotch and thighs, looking exactly like a massive gunshot wound. The massive dining room went dead silent. Braden looked down at his ruined suit, and then his gaze snapped up to me. His face turned a dangerous shade of purplish red. "You stupid, senile old bat!" he screamed, his voice cracking with pure rage. I instantly shrank back into the large oak chair, curling into myself. "I'm sorry," I whined pathetically. "My hand, it slipped, Braden." "Just like yours," Mallory gasped. For a second, I thought Braden was going to lunge across the table. Instead, he reached out, grabbed my bowl of watery oatmeal, and hurled it with all his might across the room. The ceramic bowl smashed against the expensive wallpaper, sending gray slop sliding down the floral pattern in a disgusting mess. "Clean it up," Braden hissed, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. "You get down on your hands and knees right now, and you clean up every single drop, Leo. Or you'll be sleeping in the garage." He stormed out, slamming the heavy door so violently the windows rattled. Mallory quickly mumbled a weak apology and sprinted out after him, leaving me completely alone. I pushed my chair back and walked over to the ruined wall. I knelt down on the hardwood floor, not out of obedience, but to inspect the damage. I reached out and picked up a large, jagged shard of the broken ceramic bowl. It was razor sharp, a cold, hard smile slowly stretched across my face. Braden truly thought he had humiliated a weak old man. But all he had actually done was reveal his own glaring weaknesses. He had zero emotional control. I stood up, walked calmly back to the table, and picked up the heavy steak knife Braden had just used to cut his lobster. I quietly slipped the knife into the inner pocket of my suit jacket. Tonight, the entitled wolf would have to sleep with one eye open. I lay perfectly still in the cavernous darkness of the master bedroom, waiting. A seasoned Marine never truly sleeps when he knows he is behind enemy lines. I kept my eyes shut tight, meticulously regulating my breathing to a slow, rhythmic pattern that flawlessly mimicked deep, vulnerable sleep at 2 a.m. I heard a single floorboard creak in the hallway. The heavy brass doorknob turned in a slow, agonizingly deliberate motion. Braden Cole was coming in to play his twisted nightly game. Leo had confided in me about these terrible nights, how he frequently woke up panicked and confused, convinced he was rapidly losing his mind. But as Braden crept into the room, smelling of expensive scotch and designer cologne, I understood the horrific reality. It wasn't dementia, it was calculated, textbook gaslighting. Braden stopped right beside the mattress, leaning his weight over me. "Leo, wake up," Braden whispered, his voice a venomous hiss. "Leo, you left the stove on again. You're trying to burn the whole house down, aren't you?" I remained frozen. He was actively trying to plant false, terrifying memories. I heard the faint rustle of fabric as he reached out toward the nightstand and moved Leo's water glass, deliberately rearranging the room to induce morning panic. "You are so useless, old man," Braden hissed maliciously. "Everyone is just waiting for you to die, even Mallory, actually, especially Mallory. She hates having to take care of you. We all just want the inheritance." It took every ounce of my willpower not to snap my eyes open and drive my fist straight through his throat. Braden derived sick pleasure from whispering poison into the ear of a defenseless man. I felt the air shift above my face. Braden was reaching out to violently shake me awake and disorient me. The arrogant predator had finally stepped directly into the jaws of the trap. As his hand hovered mere inches from my face, my right hand shot out from beneath the heavy duvet with the blinding, violent speed of a striking viper. My thick, calloused fingers locked instantly around Braden's wrist. I didn't just hold his arm, I crushed it. My thumb dug perfectly into the cluster of pressure points that sends pure, white-hot agony shooting straight up the arm. Braden let out a wet, choked gasp of pure shock. He immediately tried to aggressively yank his hand backward, but I was immovable. I snapped my eyes open. The room was pitch black, but there was enough moonlight for him to clearly see the cold, unyielding stare of my eyes. I didn't look like the confused, fearful Leo he was so used to tormenting. Braden froze in absolute terror, his scotch-addled brain unable to process what was happening. Who are you?" Braden stammered, his voice trembling uncontrollably. I didn't shout. I deliberately lowered my voice to a gravelly, menacing rasp. "I am the thing that actually lives in the dark, Braden," I whispered softly. He pulled harder, sheer panic setting in. "Let go." "You're crazy. You like to scare old men," I continued, entirely devoid of human emotion. "You like to whisper in the dark. You like to make people think they are going completely mad." I sat up slowly, pulling him downward, forcing his face just inches from mine. I could clearly see the cold sweat beating on his forehead. "I am not the one you should be scaring, Braden. I am the one you should be running from. Because I do not have dementia, and I absolutely do not forget. I squeezed harder. A distinct, sickening crunch echoed in the silence. It was the horrific sound of cartilage being compressed far beyond its natural limit. Braden let out a high-pitched, pathetic yelp of pain. "Please, stop, you're breaking it!" I smiled, a slow, terrifying baring of teeth. "Good," I whispered. "Now you know exactly how it feels to be helpless. Now you know that there really are monsters hiding under the bed. And tonight the monster has you." I held him there in absolute agony for 3 more seconds, letting the sheer terror soak deeply into his bones. Then, I released him abruptly. Braden stumbled wildly backward, tripped over his own feet, and crashed hard onto the carpet, clutching his throbbing wrist to his chest. "Get out," I commanded. Braden scrambled to his feet, his breath coming in ragged gasps, and sprinted out the door, slamming it shut behind him. I sat alone in the darkness and flipped on the bedside lamp. I checked Leo's oxygen machine. In the corner, Braden had deliberately turned the flow down to a dangerously low level. I then picked up Leo's pill bottle, labeled Dioxin, a critical medication for his heart failure. I popped a pill into my palm and touched it to my tongue. It was sweet. It dissolved instantly. It was a cheap, sugary placebo. Braden was actively trying to murder my brother. Tomorrow, the nightmare would escalate into open warfare. Sunlight eventually streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the master bedroom, but it brought absolutely no warmth to the cold, hard pit settling in my stomach. It was 6. My internal clock woke me up long before any alarm. I sat on the edge of the bed, slowly stretching my stiff muscles. The physical encounter with Braden last night had been deeply satisfying, but it was merely a preliminary skirmish. The fake pills burning a hole in my pocket were hard proof of his intent to kill. This was no longer just about protecting Leo's money. This was about neutralizing a lethal threat. I needed a counterattack that would violently strike his bloated ego. I walked into the massive ensuite bathroom and aggressively opened the medicine cabinet. My eyes scanned the meticulously arranged rows of expensive creams until they landed on a large, blue plastic bottle tucked away in the back corner. Magnesium citrate. It was a high-powered medical-grade saline laxative, typically used to clear out patients right before major abdominal surgery. I knew from my medic days that it was incredibly fast-acting and notoriously violent. I smiled, pulling the nearly full bottle from the shelf. I grabbed the whole bottle and headed downstairs. The sprawling kitchen was completely silent. I started up the espresso machine and found Braden's favorite mug, a custom ceramic piece with the words, "The Boss," embossed in gold lettering. I poured a steaming double shot of strong black coffee into the mug. Then, I uncapped the blue bottle of magnesium citrate and poured the thick, clear liquid directly into the coffee. I didn't stop at the recommended half cup. I just kept pouring until the heavy bottle felt significantly lighter. I stirred the concoction vigorously. The intense bitterness of the espresso would flawlessly mask the salty, chemical taste. A few minutes later, Braden swaggered into the kitchen. He was dressed in a sharp, charcoal gray suit, but his left wrist was tightly wrapped in a thick ace bandage. He looked exhausted, with dark circles hanging under his eyes, clearly showing he hadn't slept a wink. I instantly dropped my shoulders and expertly played the role of the contrite, dementia-riddled father-in-law, letting my hands tremble slightly as I turned to him. I made you coffee, Braden," I mumbled weakly. "I wanted to apologize for last night. I had a terrible nightmare. I didn't mean to grab your arm." Braden eyed me suspiciously, but predictably, his massive ego completely took over. His fragile pride simply couldn't accept the reality that a sick old man had physically overpowered him. He desperately needed to believe I was just senile. "You're damn right you were confused," he snapped, his false bravado immediately returning. "You nearly broke my wrist, old man. If you ever lay a hand on me again, I'll throw you in a nursing home so fast your head will spin." He violently snatched the mug from my hands and took a large gulp. He desperately needed the caffeine. "This tastes bitter," he complained. "I made it extra strong," I said meekly, "just how you like it for your big meeting today." Braden smirked triumphantly. That's right. I have the main board meeting at 9 o'clock. I'm officially firing 3 of your loyalists today. Leo, clearing out the dead wood. By noon, this entire company will be fully under my control. He tipped the mug back and drained every last drop of the spiked espresso. Don't wait up, we are celebrating tonight. He confidently stormed out the back door and slid into his Porsche. I watched him pull away, looking exactly like a king surveying his conquered kingdom. Braden Cole was about to have the most memorable board meeting of his entire pathetic life. By 9:30 Leo's phone buzzed on the coffee table. The text was from Sarah, Leo's deeply loyal executive assistant. I had messaged her earlier asking for updates. The text was frantic. Mr. Moretti, emergency at the office. Board meeting canceled. I smiled and quickly typed back. What happened, Sarah? Be specific. 3 dots danced on the screen. Then the reply came through. It was awful, Mr. Cole was right in the middle of his presentation to the new investors from Tokyo. He started sweating profusely. He tried to keep talking, but he turned completely white. Then, he couldn't leave the room in time. It happened right at the head of the conference table. The paramedics were called because they thought he was having a seizure, but it was just a mess, a terrible mess. He was carried out on a stretcher. Everyone saw. The Tokyo investors walked right out. I tossed the phone onto the couch and let out a deep, genuine laugh that echoed through the empty mansion. The arrogant, immaculately dressed finance director had just suffered a violent bowel accident right in front of the most important people in the industry. By lunchtime, he would be the laughingstock of the entire city. But my moment of victory was abruptly interrupted by the sound of the front door unlocking. It was too early for Braden to be back from the hospital. I walked to the foyer to find 2 burly men in blue jumpsuits carrying heavy toolboxes. Mr. Cole sent us! One of them grunted. He called from the hospital. Said we need to immediately change all the locks on the study and install a security camera in the main hallway. My laughter died instantly. Braden wasn't defeated. He was wounded, and his paranoia was driving him to lock down the house. I didn't reach for the cane. I squared my stance, letting the full, intimidating presence of a combat veteran take over. Go home, boys, I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous rumble. Excuse me, Mr. Cole paid us double. I took 3 slow, heavy steps toward them. I said, go home. Unless you want to, stick around and try to explain to the police exactly why you are trespassing on my property. The men saw the cold, dead look in my eyes and instantly recognized a fight they had no intention of participating in. Without a word, they backed out the door and retreated to their van. I locked the heavy front door behind them. The opening skirmishes were over. The doorbell rang sharply. At exactly 2 o'clock, Braden had returned, and he burst out of his study like a desperate man, trying to hold back a landslide. He marched to the front entrance and aggressively ripped the heavy door open. Standing on the porch was Saul Goldman, a ruthless shark in a tailored suit who had been Leo's personal attorney for over 40 years. Braden immediately blocked the doorway. What do you want, Saul? Leo is absolutely not seeing visitors today. He is unwell. I am not a visitor, Braden, Saul said calmly. I am his legal counsel. I have vital documents regarding the estate trust that require his immediate signature. Braden let out a harsh, nervous laugh. The trust is currently being restructured, Saul. Leo gave me full power of attorney verbally just last week. You can leave the papers with me, right now. He is so confused he barely knows what day it is. I stood up from the library, grabbing the cane, and shuffled into the foyer. Let him in, Braden. Braden spun around, visibly shocked, fear flashing in his eyes. Leo, go back to your room. You are not well. I completely ignored him. I extended a shaking hand to the lawyer. Hello, Saul. Thank you for coming. Hello, Leo, Saul said carefully, his sharp eyes narrowing as he studied my face. We need to talk, alone. Braden forcefully stepped between us. Absolutely not, as his primary caretaker. I need to be present. I looked Braden dead in the eye and dropped the confused old man act for exactly 3 seconds. I channeled 40 years of hard military command into a single piercing glare. Braden, I said, my voice low and incredibly dangerous. Go to your office. Fix the disgusting mess you made at the board meeting. Let me talk to my lawyer in peace. Or do you want me to ask Saul to launch a full forensic audit into the company's vendor finances right this second? The remaining color completely drained from Braden's face. The threat of a financial audit was his absolute kryptonite, especially with his massive gambling debts. He violently clenched his jaw, realizing he was completely outmaneuvered. Fine, he spat. You have 10 minutes. Don't believe a single word he says, Saul. He is completely delusional. Braden stormed off to the kitchen. I gestured for Saul to follow me into the library and locked the heavy oak doors. Saul dropped his briefcase on the mahogany desk and stared at me. He slowly took off his glasses. You are not Leo, he said softly, a statement of absolute fact. I smiled. You always were incredibly sharp, Saul. How did you know? Leo walks heavily on the balls of his feet. You walk firmly on your heels, Saul explained calmly. And Leo would never have threatened an audit. I walked over to the bar cart and poured 2 generous glasses of scotch. I am Vince. Saul took the glass, his hand steady. Vince, the Marine, the one everyone says is crazy. That's the one, I said, taking a sip. Leo is safe at the VA facility. We switched places. I am here to clean house, Saul, and I desperately need your help. I pulled the fake heart medication from my pocket and placed the sugary placebos on the desk. He swapped Leo's dioxin with these. This is attempted murder. Saul's face turned grim. This is incredibly serious. We need ironclad proof. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a small black box containing 4 tiny devices that looked exactly like common screws. These are pinhole cameras, high-definition audio and video, night vision capable. They transmit directly to a secure cloud server that only I can access. Put them somewhere high, somewhere permanent. I pocketed the cameras just as the doorknob rattled violently. The trap was set. Time is up. Braden yelled violently from the hallway, rattling the doorknob. I instantly slumped my shoulders, letting my mouth hang open slightly in my confused old man act, and unlocked the door. After Saul left, leaving Braden fuming in the hallway, I went straight to work. I installed the pinhole cameras in the smoke detectors and air vents. While pressing the second camera firmly into the living room vent, I heard Braden screaming into his phone downstairs. I need more time, Braden yelled frantically, clearly talking to a loan shark. The old man is still breathing. I can't just suffocate him with a pillow. It has to look natural to get the insurance payout. I froze, pressing the tiny camera into place. The red light blinked once, signifying it was actively recording. Braden Cole had just signed his own death warrant, and he didn't even know the ink was dry. The next morning, the tense ride to the Moretti Holdings corporate headquarters was deafeningly silent. Braden drove his pristine Porsche with aggressive, jerky movements, accelerating too hard and slamming on the brakes at the last second. It was a petty tactic designed to make an old man feel motion sick and out of control. I simply stared out the window, absorbing the erratic movements like a shock absorber. I needed to be the heavy anchor dragging him down. When the polished elevator doors finally opened onto the penthouse floor, the atmosphere in the office changed instantly. The receptionists, the junior analysts, the security guards, they all froze when they saw us. But they weren't looking at Braden with respect. They were looking directly at me. Good morning, Mr. Moretti, the lead receptionist said, her voice filled with genuine warmth. It is so good to see you back. Braden aggressively cut off the warm moment. He is not back. Julia, Braden snapped. He is just here to sign some legal papers. He will be gone in an hour. Hold all my calls and get Sarah to bring the notary to the main conference room immediately. He physically guided me down the long hallway, his hand gripping my elbow hard enough to leave a fresh bruise. He desperately wanted the entire staff to see that Leo Moretti was now frail, incompetent, and fully guided by his strong son-in-law. But I clearly saw the looks on their faces. They didn't see a leader in Braden Cole. They saw a usurper. We entered the massive, intimidating conference room. At the far end sat Sarah, Leo's deeply loyal executive assistant, and a nervous-looking man holding a heavy notary stamp. When Sarah saw me, she stood up immediately, her eyes darting straight to Braden's tight grip on my arm. "Mr. Moretti," she said softly, "can I get you anything?" Braden answered for me. "He is fine, Sarah. We just need his signature on the transfer of operational authority. The sooner he signs, the sooner he can go home and rest. He's having a very bad day." Braden pulled out a heavy leather chair, delivering it as a direct command. I sat. On the table lay a massive stack of legal documents, easily 3 inches thick, bound in expensive blue leather folders. The transfer papers, the absolute death warrant for Leo's life's work. Braden quickly flipped open the folder directly to the very last page, uncapped a heavy gold fountain pen, and shoved it into my hand. "Right here, Leo," he instructed, tapping the X. "Just sign your name. This just lets me handle the boring day-to-day stuff. So, you don't have to worry your head about it anymore." The notary watched me closely. Sarah watched me, her hands clasped tightly together as if silently praying for a miracle. I looked at the signature line. Then, I turned the page back. Braden sighed loudly, exasperated. "Leo, what are you doing?" "I am reading, Braden," I mumbled, adjusting my glasses. "I want to read." "You can't read this legalese," he snapped impatiently. "You will just get confused. It is standard boilerplate. Just sign the damn paper so we can go." I completely ignored him. I flipped back another page, bypassing the heavy legal jargon, looking directly at the numbers attached to the financial appendices. I may not be a corporate real estate genius, but in the Marines I was responsible for massive logistics supply chains. I knew exactly how to spot when a corrupt supplier was padding the bill. My eyes stopped dead on a line item in the quarterly projection. Consulting fees, Apex Solutions, $300. I flipped forward 2 pages. Retainer fee, Apex Solutions, $200. I slowly pulled a cheap plastic VA calculator from my pocket. I started punching in the numbers, the plastic keys clicking loudly in the tense silence. Braden laughed nervously. "What is he doing?" "He is playing with a calculator." "This is ridiculous. 300,000 plus 200,000. I muttered aloud. "That is $500,000, Braden, for marketing." I looked up at Sarah. "Sarah, who are Apex Solutions?" The room went deadly silent. Braden froze. Sarah blinked, clearly surprised. I don't know, sir. I have never seen a single invoice from them. Braden handles the vendor accounts personally now." I turned my gaze back to Braden. A single bead of perspiration rolled down his temple. "It is a new marketing firm, Leo," he said, speaking entirely too quickly. "They are rebranding us. It is complicated digital stuff. You wouldn't understand. But last month, you fired the entire marketing department to save money," I countered. "Why are we paying $500,000 to a company that Sarah has never heard of? And why is the address for this company listed as a P.O. box in the Cayman Islands?" Braden's face turned a violent shade of red. "Give me that!" He lunged forward to snatch the paper away. I slammed my hand down flat on the table. The sound echoed through the massive room like a gunshot. "I am not finished," I shouted. The notary physically jumped in his chair. Sarah gasped. Braden recoiled, as if he had just been struck. I dropped the confused old man act completely. I stood up, leaning heavily over the table and using my height to thoroughly intimidate him. I flipped to the next section. "Vehicle maintenance, $80,000. We don't have a fleet of commercial trucks." "Braden, what vehicles are we maintaining for 80 grand a month? Or is that the payment on your Porsche and the luxury boat you told Saul you didn't have?" Braden was physically shaking. He looked at the notary, then at Sarah. "Get out!" He screamed, "Everyone, get out!" "No," I barked, my voice echoing with absolute authority. "Sarah, stay." Sarah firmly stood her ground, a massive glimmer of hope lighting up her eyes. "This isn't a transfer of authority, Braden," I growled, my voice dropping to a menacing pitch. "This is a robbery. You are actively bleeding this company dry. You are funneling corporate money into offshore shell companies to pay off your massive personal debts. Did you really think because I am old, I couldn't spot a cheap thief when he is standing right in front of me?" I picked up the massive stack of transfer documents and gripped them tightly. With one swift, violent motion, I tore the entire stack in half. Then I tore it again, and again until the multi-million-dollar transfer of authority was nothing but useless confetti. I threw the shreds directly into his shocked face. "Sarah," I commanded, "initiate a full forensic audit of every single vendor account by tomorrow morning. If a single dollar is out of place, you prepare the termination papers for Mr. Cole." Humiliated, entirely exposed, and totally cornered, Braden went completely silent. I recognized the dark, desperate look in his eyes, a look I had seen in cornered insurgents during the war. He had shifted from being an arrogant bully to a terrified, desperate man. And a desperate man is a deadly one. He was going to try to kill me. And soon, after another suffocatingly silent drive back to the estate, Braden threw the Porsche into reverse, the tires squealing against the expensive pavement, and sped off. He was undoubtedly racing to do desperate damage control with his corrupt lawyers or his loan sharks. With the house blessedly empty, I took the opportunity to finally confront Mallory. I found Leo's daughter sitting alone in the sun-drenched conservatory, a half-empty glass of expensive Chardonnay in her hand, despite it barely being noon. I needed to know if there was still a shred of the sweet girl Leo had raised, or if she was entirely corrupted. I walked in and sat heavily in the wicker chair opposite her. I dropped the senile act entirely. "We need to talk, Mallory." She didn't even look up from her phone. "If you're here to complain about Braden again, Dad, I really don't want to hear it." "He is bankrupting the company, Mallory," I said plainly, laying out the stark reality. "He has embezzled millions, and he is physically abusing me. He pushed me down the stairs. He is swapping my heart medication with sugar pills." I waited for the shock. I waited for the horror. I waited for the daughter to rise up and furiously defend her father. Instead, she took a long, slow sip of her wine, finally meeting my gaze. Her eyes were completely dead. "So what?" I stared at her, genuinely stunned. "Excuse me?" Mallory let out a bitter, exhausted laugh. "Oh, please, don't act so naive. Do you honestly think I don't know? I know about the offshore accounts. I know about his massive gambling debts. I even know he's using company money to fund a luxury apartment downtown for his 22-year-old mistress, Tiffany." My jaw tightened. "You know he has a mistress, you know he is stealing, and you know he is actively trying to kill your father. And you do absolutely nothing. What do you want me to do?" she snapped, suddenly angry. "Leave him and go where? I have never worked a day in my life. If Braden goes down, the scandal will ruin us. I'll lose my membership at the country club. I'll lose this house. I will be completely humiliated in front of everyone I know." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a desperate, pathetic plea. "Just sign the damn papers, Dad. Sign the papers. Go quietly to the nursing home and just let it end, please. Just keep the peace, so I don't lose everything." I looked at my niece. I didn't see Leo's daughter anymore. I saw a total moral vacuum. She was so terrified of losing her shallow, artificial lifestyle that she was completely willing to sacrifice her own father to a murderer. I stood up slowly. She wasn't a victim to be saved. I mentally categorized her as a hostile combatant. "I won't bother you again," I said coldly, and walked out. Later that afternoon, I retreated to the library and pulled up the live feed from the hidden cameras Saul had provided. Braden had returned, looking completely unhinged. I watched on the screen as he locked the door to his study, walked over to a large landscape painting on the wall, swung it open, and punched a code into a hidden digital safe. I leaned closer to the screen, memorizing the combination. Braden pulled out a velvet bag, spilling loose diamonds onto the desk. Then, he reached back into the safe and pulled out a heavy snub-nosed .38 special revolver. He checked the cylinder. It was fully loaded. He picked up his phone and dialed. "It's me," he said, his voice trembling with sheer panic. "The old man didn't sign. He tore up the papers. But don't worry. I have a backup plan. I'm going to take care of him tonight. I'll stage it to look like a violent break-in gone wrong. A tragedy. The life insurance policy pays out double for an accidental death. I'll have the money by morning." My blood ran cold. The slow poison wasn't working fast enough for him anymore. He was escalating to a violent, immediate execution. I needed to know exactly what was driving this desperate timeline. I watched the camera feed as Braden hastily shoved the gun back into the safe, leaving it unlocked in his frantic state, and bolted out the French doors to move his car. Slipping into my old reconnaissance mindset, I quickly picked the lock to the study and slipped inside. I went straight for the open wall. Safe, I pulled out a stack of black leather ledgers and flipped them open. There it was, the absolute damning truth. Braden owed exactly $5 million to the Payback syndicate, a notoriously ruthless Eastern European mob. Attached to the final ledger page was a handwritten note, completely devoid of emotion. Pay by the 15th, or we take the pretty wife. I pulled out my phone and rapidly photographed every single page, securing the ultimate proof of his desperate, murderous motive. Suddenly, I heard heavy footsteps pounding on the hardwood floor right outside the study door. Braden hadn't gone far. The doorknob violently rattled. I slammed the safe shut, spun the dial, and desperately scanned the room. There was no time to reach the door. I dove hard under the massive, solid mahogany desk, tucking my legs in tight just as the study door swung open. Braden stormed in, breathing heavily. He threw himself into the heavy leather executive chair. I was trapped. I was curled up in a tight ball underneath the desk, mere inches away from his expensive dress shoes. Braden's phone rang loudly. He snatched it up. "I told you, I'll have it!" he screamed into the receiver. I could hear the cold, heavily accented voice bleeding through the phone speaker. "Time is up, Mr. Cole. The boss is very unhappy. You have until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. If the $5 million is not transferred, we are coming to the house. And we are taking Mallory." The line went dead. Above me, Braden let out a strangled, pathetic scream of absolute frustration. He slammed his fists onto the desk, rattling the wood just inches above my head. "I have to do it now," Braden muttered to himself, his voice shaking with terrifying resolve. "I have to kill him right now." He suddenly stood up from the chair and began pacing frantically, stopping directly in front of the desk, just 6 inches away from my face. I held my breath, slowly reaching into my jacket for the steak knife I had stolen. My muscles coiled tight like a spring. Braden suddenly reached down toward the floor. I braced myself for the violent impact, ready to drive the knife upward, but his hand bypassed me, merely grabbing a crumpled piece of paper from the wastebasket, before he turned and bolted out of the room to execute his deadly plan. As soon as Braden's chaotic footsteps faded down the hallway, I slid out from under the desk and quickly retreated to the guest bedroom. I pulled out my phone and tapped into Saul's secure camera feed. I needed to know exactly what kind of clumsy, desperate murder Braden was planning. I switched to the camera located in the master bedroom. Braden was frantically moving in and out of the en-suite master bathroom. He wasn't holding the revolver. Instead, he was holding a large bottle of baby oil and a bar of heavy soap. He was meticulously coating the slick, imported marble floor of the bathroom, just outside the shower. He was setting a deadly slip-and-fall trap. A frail old man wanders in, slips on the wet marble, and fatally cracks his skull. It would completely avoid a messy police investigation, guarantee a massive double indemnity payout, and cleanly solve his $5 million mob problem by morning. I watched him finish his deadly work and retreat downstairs to wait. A cold, tactical calm washed over me. Braden wanted an accident. I decided to give him a masterpiece. I slipped quietly down the back stairs to the massive kitchen pantry. Utilizing basic combat medic triage drills, I mixed thick corn syrup and red food coloring in a small plastic bag until it looked exactly like thick arterial blood. I sealed the bag tightly and tucked it into my palm. I walked heavily back upstairs to the master bedroom, ensuring my footsteps echoed down to the living room. I slowly pushed open the bathroom door. The marble floor gleamed under the harsh lights, slick and treacherous. I took a deep breath, mentally bracing myself. I deliberately stepped onto the oiled surface, let my feet fly out from under me, and purposefully threw my entire body backward. I executed a highly controlled military fall, tucking my chin to protect my actual skull, but allowed my heavy shoulders and back to slam violently against the solid marble floor. The sickeningly loud, fleshy thud echoed through the silent house. At the exact moment of impact, I violently squeezed the plastic bag, bursting it against the back of my head. The thick, warm red syrup instantly pooled out, spreading ominously across the white tiles. I closed my eyes, relaxed every single muscle, and played completely dead. Downstairs, the floorboards creaked. Braden was coming. I held my breath as his footsteps approached. He stopped right at the doorway. For a long, agonizing moment, the only sound was Braden's ragged breathing. I fully expected him to feign panic. Instead, I heard a chilling whisper. Finally, I cracked my eyelids just a fraction. Braden wasn't horrified. A grotesque, triumphant grin stretched across his face as he looked down at my seemingly lifeless body. He didn't dial 911. Instead, he pulled out his phone and coldly snapped 3 flash photographs of my corpse to send to the Payback syndicate as proof the money was secured. Then, he took a step closer, looking down at me with pure hatred. "You ruined my suit, you old bastard," Braden sneered. Without warning, he pulled back his foot and viciously kicked me squarely in the ribs. The sharp pain flared instantly, but my military discipline held me perfectly still, absorbing the cowardly blow. Satisfied that I was truly dead, Braden turned and walked out, heading downstairs to pour himself a celebratory scotch, undoubtedly planning to wait an hour before calling the paramedics. I waited until I heard the distinct clink of ice from the living room below. Slowly I stood up. I grabbed a plush white towel and wiped the sticky red syrup off my face. I looked up at the tiny black pinhole camera in the air vent. The red light was blinking steadily, every single second. The trap, the photographs, the brutal kick had been captured in crystal clear video. I walked quietly down the grand staircase. Braden was standing at the kitchen island, his back to me, chugging a glass of expensive scotch. He was typing furiously on his phone. "You missed," I said. I didn't use Leo's weak voice. I used my own deep, gravelly Marine command. Braden physically jumped, letting out a startled shriek. The heavy crystal tumbler slipped from his fingers and shattered violently on the hardwood floor. He spun around, his eyes wide in frantic search. When he saw me standing completely unharmed in the doorway, the fake blood mostly wiped away, his brain seemingly short-circuited. He literally stumbled backward, crashing into the refrigerator. "No," Braden gasped. I saw you. You hit your head. I am a lot harder to kill than that." "Braden," I said calmly, stepping fully into the light. I didn't have a slump. I stood at my full height, my broad shoulders squared, emanating pure lethal intent. You're not Leo," Braden stammered, his eyes darting frantically. "Who the hell are you?" "I am the ghost of your terrible decisions," I replied coldly. "And right now, that camera hidden in the vent upstairs is securely uploading high-definition footage of you setting a lethal trap, photographing a corpse, and kicking a defenseless old man. The police will have their copy shortly." Braden's face completely drained of color. His grand, murderous plan had just spectacularly imploded, completely ruining his life and leaving him entirely exposed to the mob. "Now," I said, dialing 911, "I am going to call an ambulance for myself. I am going to complain of severe chest pains. It will give me a perfect medical excuse for Leo to miss your big corporate gala tomorrow night. And it will get me out of this house before I lose my temper and break your neck." I left Braden standing frozen in a puddle of scotch and broken glass. The wailing sirens of the arriving ambulance provided the perfect cover for my extraction. I played the terrified father-in-law for the paramedics, complaining of radiating heart pains. They rushed me to the nearest emergency room. The moment the triage nurse turned her back, I slipped out the side exit. A heavily tinted black passenger van was idling quietly in the alleyway. The side door slid open, and I climbed inside, greeted by the reassuring smell of old leather. "Look what the cat dragged in," Big Mike rumbled from the driver's seat. Sitting behind him were Gunner, Tex, and Doc, my old squad. When a Marine asks for backup, the squad answers. 30 minutes later, the van pulled up to a secure safe house. I walked in to find Leo nervously pacing. He looked significantly better. The bruises were fading, and without the constant gaslighting, he looked more present. "Vince!" Leo gasped, hugging me tightly. "Phase 1 is officially complete," I said. "Braden Cole is locked in his house. completely terrified and intensely paranoid. But you need to understand exactly what kind of monster he is. I connected my phone to the television and pressed play. Leo watched in stunned, horrified silence as Braden set the lethal trap, smiled over my bloody body, took photos, and delivered the vicious kick. Then I played the audio file of the Russian mobster threatening Mallory's life. He owes the mob $5 million, I explained bluntly. He was planning to murder you to collect the double indemnity payout by morning. The fear that had defined Leo's posture for months slowly melted away, replaced by a cold, hard realization. The soft, forgiving billionaire died in that room, and a hardened, fiercely protective father emerged. "What is the plan, Vince?" Leo asked, his voice steady. I unzipped a garment bag, revealing Leo's bespoke midnight blue tuxedo. "Tomorrow night is the massive corporate gala. Braden is planning to announce that you have been permanently hospitalized and that he is taking over Moretti Holdings." Leo looked at the tuxedo. "I can't face him, Vince, not in front of all those people." "You won't be alone," Big Mike rumbled, stepping into the room. "You'll have a security detail of 4 combat veterans." "Consider this tuxedo the armor of a king, Leo," I said. "You are going to take back your kingdom." I laid out the final tactical plan. I would enter the gala first, heavily bandaged in a wheelchair, playing the broken victim. And 10 minutes later, Leo would walk through those grand ballroom doors with the police. Tomorrow night, the trap would snap shut, and Braden Cole would be utterly destroyed. The Grand Sterling Hotel was a beacon of opulence, its grand ballroom dripping in crystal chandeliers. 500 of Chicago's wealthiest elites board members, and vital investors milled about, sipping champagne. Braden Cole was aggressively charming the crowd, flashing a practiced smile that didn't quite reach his panicked, darting eyes. He desperately tried to project the image of a strong leader stepping into the void. Beside him stood Mallory, wrapped in a designer gown, looking completely terrified and visibly eaten alive by her complicit silence. At exactly 8 o'clock, Braden confidently took the center stage. A massive, high-definition LD screen glowed brightly behind him. From our tactical vantage point, hidden on the shadowy mezzanine balcony, my squad and I watched him perform. I was holding my phone in one hand while Doc finished wrapping thick, white medical gauze tightly around my head and chest. "Ladies and gentlemen," Braden began, his voice projecting a fake, solemn gravitas. "I stand before you with a heavy heart. My father-in-law, the great Leo Moretti, has been struggling with a rapidly declining mind. It is with deep sadness that I must announce that Leo has been permanently hospitalized following a tragic medical episode." A collective murmur of feigned sympathy rippled through the wealthy crowd. "But," Braden continued, his voice rising triumphantly, "Leo's incredible legacy will not falter. He has legally handed total operational control of this company over to me." The crowd began to politely applaud. I looked down at my phone and quickly typed a single text message directly to Braden's personal cell phone. "I know exactly what you did last night. Look up." I hit send on the stage. Braden's phone buzzed. He casually pulled it out, glanced down at the screen, and his smile vanished instantly. His face turned a sickly, ghostly white. The heavy crystal champagne flute slipped from his trembling fingers, shattering loudly against the wooden stage. He slowly, terrifiedly lifted his gaze directly up at the shadowy balcony. I stepped forward into a narrow beam of light, deliberately leaving my face completely unbandaged. I stared down at him with the exact face of the man he firmly believed he had brutally murdered. Braden completely lost his mind. "No!" he screamed, his voice cracking into a high-pitched shriek of absolute terror. He stumbled backward, violently pointing a shaking finger up at the balcony. "He's dead! The dead man is here!" I saw him die. The polite applause died instantly. The 500 guests fell into a stunned, uncomfortable silence. Mallory rushed forward, trying to desperately calm him down to save face, but Braden violently swatted her away. "Get away from me!" he shrieked. I turned to Saul, who was sitting next to me with a sleek laptop open. "Execute," I ordered, Saul hit a single button, the massive LED screen behind the stage flickered. The corporate logo vanished, instantly replaced by crystal clear, high-definition security footage. The entire ballroom gasped in unison. Displayed on the massive screen was the master bathroom of the Moretti estate. The crowd watched in horrified silence as Braden Cole meticulously coated the marble floor with baby oil. They watched the elderly man slip and fall violently, a pool of red liquid spreading from his head. The truly damning moment came next. The crowd watched as Braden entered the frame. They saw the grotesque, triumphant smile spread across his face. They watched him calmly photograph the corpse, and then a collective gasp of pure revulsion echoed through the ballroom as the video showed Braden delivering a vicious, hateful kick to the defenseless man's ribs. "Turn it off!" Braden screamed frantically, lunging at the podium's disabled control panel. "It's a fake, it's an AI deep fake." He staged the whole thing. As Braden shrieked his desperate denials, the video abruptly cut to black, replaced by a simple audio waveform. The cold, heavily accented voice of the Russian mobster echoed through the speakers, demanding $5 million. Then, Braden's own frantic voice played for the entire room to hear. "I'll have it by tomorrow morning. The old man is going to have an accident tonight. The life insurance policy pays out double. I'll wire you the money, just don't touch Mallory." The silence in the ballroom was deafening. It was the sound of a man's entire life and freedom being completely obliterated in real time. Mallory stood frozen on the stage, her eyes wide with unadulterated horror, finally realizing the true depths of the monster she had protected. Investors were already pulling out their phones, frantically calling their brokers to dump their stock. Braden was hyperventilating, spinning in circles, totally trapped. With perfect theatrical timing, the heavy brass doors of the main ballroom elevator slid open with a loud ding. Big Mike stepped out, pushing a high-end medical wheelchair. Sitting in it was me, now fully wrapped in white gauze and thick bandages, playing the role of the heavily injured victim. I rolled out onto the center of the ballroom floor, stopping right at the base of the stage. "You," Braden stammered, his eyes bulging with absolute horror. "You were dead," I checked. I let out a low, gravelly laugh. "That is your problem, Braden. You are a coward. A real predator always makes absolutely sure his prey is completely dead." Braden's head snapped wildly from side to side. The main exits were solidly blocked by Big Mike, Gunner, Tex, and Doc, an impenetrable wall of seasoned muscle. The side doors swung open, and a dozen uniformed Chicago police officers poured into the room. Completely cornered, his entire life ruined, Braden snapped. With a feral, panicked scream, he lunged off the stage. He grabbed a sharp steak knife from a VIP dinner table and charged directly at me, fully intending to finish the job. The crowd screamed in terror. He assumed I was just a weak, wheelchair-bound old man. As Braden brought the knife down in a desperate arc, I didn't flinch. I reached up and caught his descending wrist in midair. My thick fingers locked around his forearm with an iron, crushing grip, instantly finding the pressure point. Braden shrieked in agony as the knife slipped harmlessly from his numbed fingers. Still holding his wrist hostage, I slowly stood up from the wheelchair. I reached up and violently ripped the white gauze bandages from my face and head. I squared my broad shoulders, revealing the thick, muscular physique of a combat veteran. "I am not Leo," I growled, my voice radiating pure menace. Driven by blind panic, Braden attempted a desperate punch. I easily deflected the strike and drove a devastating, perfectly placed body shot directly into his solar plexus. The heavy blow landed with a sickening thud. All the air exploded from Braden's lungs, and he instantly crumpled to the floor, completely incapacitated. The police immediately swarmed forward, snapping heavy steel cuffs onto his wrists. As they began reading him his Miranda rights, Braden began sobbing hysterically, begging the police for immediate protection. He knew exactly what awaited him. The Payback syndicate had just watched him fail on a public live stream. As the police dragged a blubbering Braden away, the crowd parted respectfully. Walking slowly down the center aisle, leaning lightly on his silver cane, was the real Leo Moretti. He was wearing the bespoke midnight blue tuxedo, looking incredibly dignified and undeniably powerful. A collective gasp rippled through the ballroom as the guests looked from the man in the tuxedo to the man standing by the wheelchair, finally realizing the brilliant switch we had pulled. Braden saw Leo and wept pathetically. "Leo, please, you have to help me. The mob, they're going to kill me." "I'm family." Leo looked down at the pathetic man. "Family doesn't poison family, Braden," Leo said coldly. "Enjoy prison." Mallory ran forward, tears streaming down her face, trying to grab Leo's arm. "Daddy, I'm so sorry." Braden forced me to stay quiet. Leo gently but firmly removed her hand. "I heard the tapes, Mallory," Leo said softly, breaking her completely. "Effective immediately. Your trust fund is permanently frozen. Your credit cards are canceled. Your car is being repossessed. It is time you finally learned how to survive on your own." Mallory collapsed into a nearby chair, weeping hysterically. Leo turned his back on her, walked over to me, and pulled me into a fierce embrace. The crowd erupted into deafening applause. 1 month later, Leo and I were sitting peacefully on a wooden dock at his secluded lake house, casting fishing lines into the still water. A lot had changed. Braden Cole was in a maximum security prison, however. The Petravic syndicate has a long reach. Braden had reportedly suffered a tragic accident in the prison showers last week, resulting in 2 severely broken legs. He now lived in a state of absolute, constant terror in protective custody. Mallory was currently working the breakfast shift as a hostess at a local diner. Humbled and exhausted, she had recently called Leo to talk. Leo had cautiously agreed to a brief visit on the strict condition that she take the public bus. As for Leo, he had completely recovered his physical health, taken back his company, and started a powerful legal foundation dedicated to protecting victims of elder abuse. "I still can't believe you pulled it off, Vince," Leo smiled. "You saved my life. I took a slow drag from my cigarette. I was no longer just a crazy veteran. I was a brother, a protector, and the man who taught a monster that you never, ever mess with family. So, let this be a lesson. Treat your elders with the utmost respect, because you never know which frail old man might just be a sleeping wolf, patiently waiting for a reason to wake up. And if you decide to poke that wolf, you had better bring a helmet."